He's unmuting. Just everybody take a breath. It's Friday night or possibly Saturday morning for some friends who are on this fireside.
Can you hear me, Dara?
Now we can hear you. Sure.
Very good. That's the time. Welcome, everybody. We have a wonderful meeting tonight or session tonight. You are going to enjoy that very much. It touches my heart always when Pat talks. Without much ado, we are going to have a prayer that Albors is going to have an opening prayer. And then we will have some reading that Alex is going to have. And then Corey is going to introduce the speaker. After that, we are going to have the speaker. And Miss Dara is going to control everybody's chat and have a chat room open for you, for your comments and etc. Without much ado, Dara, would you like to say anything before we start, please?
Sure. Thank you. Welcome, dear friends. Lovely to be with you all again this evening. And for those of you who are new, welcome. Any new friends on here? Okay, so then you all know that's what our fireside is about. I'll just abbreviate it. Just going to ask that friends, that we keep our comments in the chat box, that we call on ourselves to discipline and don't comment until after our speaker is done speaking, and then we'll open it up for the chat. So with that, welcome, and turn it over to Albors.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Vouchsafe unto me, O my God, the full measure of thy love and thy good pleasure, and through the attractions of thy resplendent light enrapture our hearts, O thou who art the supreme evidence and the all-glorified. Send down upon me as a token of thy grace, thy vitalizing breezes, throughout the daytime and in the night season, O Lord of bounty. No deed have I done, O my God, to merit beholding thy face, and I know of a certainty that were I to live as long as the world lasts, I would fail to accomplish any deed as such to deserve this favor, inasmuch as the station of a servant shall never fall short of access to thy holy precincts, unless thy bounty should reach me, and thy tender mercy pervade me, and thy loving kindness encompass me. All praise be unto thee, O thou, besides whom there is none other God. Graciously enable me to ascend unto thee, to be granted the honor of dwelling in thy nearness, and to have communion with thee alone. No God is there but thee. Indeed, shouldst thou desire to confer blessing upon a servant, thou wouldst bolt out from the realm of his heart every mention or disposition except thine own mention. And shouldst thou ordain evil for a servant by any reason, that which his hands have unjustly wrought before thy face, thou wouldst test him with the benefits of this world and of the next, that he might become preoccupied therewith and forget thy remembrance. The Bab.
Corey, are you here? I'm sorry. Alex, are you here?
Of course. So the passage that I'm going to read tonight is from Shoghi Effendi's book, The World Order of Baha'u'llah, which is a compilation of 7 letters written by Shoghi Effendi, who was the guardian of the Baha'i faith. This particular letter was written April 21st of 1933 and is titled The Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. And I'll just be reading a short paragraph from that letter. Call out to Zion, O Carmel, writes Baha'u'llah, and announce the joyful tidings. He that was hidden from mortal eyes is come. His all-conquering sovereignty is manifest. His all-encompassing splendor is revealed. Hasten forth and circumambulate the city of God that hath descended from heaven, the celestial Kaaba, around which have circled in adoration the favorite of God, the pure in heart, and the company of the most exalted angels. I am the one, he in another connection affirms, whom the tongue of Isaiah hath extolled, the one with whose name both the Torah and the Evangel were adorned. The glory of Sinai hath hastened to circle round the dayspring of this revelation, while from the heights of the kingdom the voice of the Son of God is heard proclaiming, Bestir yourselves, ye proud ones of the earth, and hasten ye towards him. Carmel hath in this day hastened in longing adoration to attain his court, whilst from the heart of Zion there cometh the cry, the promise of all ages is now fulfilled. That which hath been announced in the holy writ of God, the beloved, the Most High, is made manifest. Hijaz is astir by the breeze, announcing the tidings of joyous reunion. Praise be to thee, we hear her exclaim. O my Lord, the Most High, I was dead through my separation from thee. The breeze laden with the fragrance of thy presence hath brought me back to life. Happy is he that turneth unto thee, and woe betide the erring. By the one true God, Elijah hath hastened unto my court, and hath circumambulated in the daytime, and in the night season, my throne of glory. Solomon, in all his majesty circles, in adoration around me in this day, uttering this most exalted word, I have turned my face towards thy face, O thou omnipotent ruler of the world. I am wholly detached from all things pertaining unto thee, and yearn for that which thou dost possess.
Wow. Bravo. Thank you, Alex. Corey, are you here?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker tonight, Pat Kohli, a man dear to my heart, whom I've had many a fascinating conversation with. He was born into a Roman Catholic family and became a Christian in the more traditional way by accepting Jesus Christ as a savior in 1977. He's well studied in Christianity, as we will probably see, and was challenged by his brother to investigate the Baha'i faith, after which he read the Bible cover to cover and discovered there was nothing in it inconsistent with the faith. That's a story he told me. He declared in 1987. He has 3 children and some granddaughters. He lives in Colombia for now, and we're all grateful for Zoom that we will be able to continue to perhaps have the bounty of his presence when he moves to Florida any day now. He works for the government, doing computer stuff. He's very modest about that sort of thing, but he has an expertise in many areas. I won't embarrass him by going into it, but he's a minor celebrity in certain circles. I'll just leave it at that. Please, everyone, welcome Pat Kohli.
Thank you very much, Corey.
Wow.
So, I'm going to, here's the button. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the conversation. I'm going to have a couple of slides. I practiced a little bit with my brother Joe, who told me I'm overdoing the slides, so I'm going to flip back and forth a couple of times. Sometimes I get into religious conversations with people of different beliefs. I get into conversations with atheists and agnostics. They will often tell me or challenge me, why doesn't God show himself? And to me, that the question illustrates a very different concept of God from the concept that I hold, that God is not like a dog or a golden calf or a person or the family next door. 30 some years ago, I met a Pentecostal man in Gaithersburg about the time that I declared. And he told me that he knew God like the back of his hand. That's how he knew I was wrong, because he knew God like the back of his hand. And again, I just found that to be a very different concept of God. And I think that if somebody imagines God to be like a golden calf or a blue whale or the back of their hand, they can approach God, or they can sit on God and go about their business, feeling that God doesn't really see what's going on. It's a kind of a lesser concept, but it's a concept that would evade the topic of being in the presence of God. And that's something that I wanted to talk about. So that's what we're looking at today. Let's hit the button again. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about air as a way of trying to understand some of the concept. We don't really see air, and yet when the wind is blowing, or when there's a fire and there's smoke, we hear that there's air. We can feel it. We can smell when the air is going bad. But when the air is basically still, we're not particularly mindful of it. It would be easy to forget the whole concept of air. So we're going to think about that hopefully for a minute or two, and I'll have a quick review about the principles. So I don't know that we've got any newcomers here. Are there people maybe come on the video and wave at me if this is your first or second?
I don't see anybody.
We don't see anybody. Okay, so I'm going to skip over some principles, the basic Baha'i principles. I'm going to skip over a quick summary of the central figures. We'll skip over that. If you're interested, I can share my my slides with people.
We do have, actually, if I may interject, we do have, an Baha'i who may be benefit from the principles.
Okay, we're going to hit the principles a little bit then. Thank you so much. No. Thank you very much for questioning it. A lot of times I've been in presentations and people will say, "Please hold your questions," and then they go on and on for half an hour, and I don't know if they're talking about. I don't really know what they're talking about. I wish I could have asked the question earlier to help get a context of what they were talking about. And so then I'll ask the question 30 minutes in, and then I feel like, okay, I have some understanding what they're talking about. Maybe I wish I could get the conversation all over again, but we never really got a sense of context. So some principles. A lot of these principles are about unity, about human unity, about a global village. And they reflect the times that we're living in, the times that basically began the modern era in the middle of the 19th century with telecommunication, transoceanic travel, those kinds of things. Nations need to get along, people need to get along. So those are our basic principles in a nutshell. And then there are three central figures. The Bab, also known as the primal point, prophet herald of the faith. My favorite book for a book that is, in my opinion, to the extent possible, quote unquote authoritative, be the Dawnbreakers, that describes the Bab's life and his mission with the Babis. The prophet herald of the faith. Second major figure is Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the faith. He was born Mirza Hussein Ali Nuri. The Bab was born Syed Ali Muhammad. The conference of Badash, people took on new names. Baha'u'llah took on the name of Baha, and he's known as Baha'u'llah, or as the splendor or glory of God. My favorite set of books for Baha'u'llah would be the Revelation of Baha'u'llah. He wrote many books. Some of probably the most significant ones might be the Kitab-i-Aqan, or the Book of Certitude, the Hidden Words, the Kitab-i-Aqdas. Baha'u'llah was imprisoned, banished successively, and was imprisoned in Akka, wrote letters to the Pope, presidents, emperors, kings. In some respects, I believe Muhammad also wrote letters to the neighboring kings and emperors when he began his mission. And Abdul-Baha, who occupies a unique station, not a manifestation of God like the other two, but a perfect human, because he was a perfect exemplar of the teachings of his father, Baha'u'llah. So that's a little bit of quick background. So I'm going to jump out a little bit. Okay, hopefully everyone's good with the quick summary. So one of my hobbies is scuba diving, And again, scuba diving has some relationship with the air. So I'm going to show the slide again and talk a little bit about travel, and people can think about air and how we really don't see or smell the air. But we have the air dissolved in our blood. It's circulating with our body. If we didn't have air, we would die. If you go up in an airplane high enough, if you don't have a pressurized cabin, at some point you will pass out. You need that air. And yet oftentimes you can be completely oblivious to that. My sense of God is essentially very much like that, where if I'm born, I don't realize air. It's just not a concern. I don't realize the presence of God. At some point, reality cuts in, and I find out that I do need God, and that I live better with God. I live better when I manage my relationship with God. I live better when I pray every day rather than waiting until my head is on fire and I say, oh my gosh, I need to say a prayer because my children are fed up with me, and I've been bad with my wife, and my boss is going to fire me. I need to do something. That's not a relationship with God. And so it's important for me anyways to have the sense of God and the sense of the presence of God. And so let's go back and look at some of the driving factors. Corey mentioned I was raised as a Christian, and I read the whole Bible. One of the interesting things in the Bible was some of the stories. At the beginning, you've got the story of the Garden of Eden. Apologies about the artwork. I've just found sometimes it's easier for people to pay attention if there are pictures every now and then. At the beginning of the Bible, there's a story, and it's a very difficult to understand story, and oftentimes people point to different parts and say this is important, that's important, or the other thing is important. But for me, the important thing that I see in that story is that people lived in the presence of God, and to the extent that the story is factually true, spiritually true, metaphysically true, metaphorically true, I don't know, but I believe that the part that man was created to live in the presence of God, that's a true part, regardless of who ate the apple or why the apple was eaten or all the other goofy stuff about talking snakes and who knows what. That's a true part. And I point to that as a true part. I'm not just cherry picking things, because that's the first story in the Bible. And then when you look at the last story in the Bible, subliminally people picked a Bible story that kind of balance that one out. So we're going to look at the end of the Bible, at the book of Revelation, final chapters in the book of Revelation. There's this holy city, the New Jerusalem, and there's the voice of God right there for everyone to hear, and God will dwell with the people in the tabernacle, and we'll be God's people, and God will be our God. And so there is this balance, this symmetry in the Bible, at least in the Christian Bible, about our relationship with God and about living with God. It is something, it can be taken as a promise. And yet, much of my life, I didn't really feel like I was living in the presence of God. I had that very strong feeling when I declared. And it was like a spooky kind of a week or two for me when I realized I've been living in the presence of God all along. It's like sometimes I imagine people are recording me. I have a conversation with one of the employees. They have to plug in their phone, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to record me. I'm going to be on my best behavior. Sometimes I say things that are probably too honest. I don't want to get too honest. I don't want to be deceitful, but I think the guy's going to record me. So there's this realization that effectively all my life, I've never really had any privacy. God knows everything that I've done. And God created me. I can't really be too ashamed of things, but God is watching me. God's going to help me. And there's a realization. And at some point, as I put this together, this story was interesting and fascinating. So I'll try to tell the story, though I'm not exactly sure how it ties in at this point on this telling. But Nasser's heard the story a couple of times. So many, and as people age, there's a different realization about age. So I was walking around and I saw like a 5-year-old kid walking around with one of his parents walking around the pond. And I said to myself, gosh, when that kid is like 85, it'll be like the year 2100. And I thought, that's just crazy. And yet when I think back to when I was, I guess 11 or so, I had this teacher, Sister Cecilia. And Sister Cecilia was really old, and she was old even for 1969 or 1970 or something like that. And she was a World War I survivor, and she would talk about stories about the Huns and all kinds of stuff. You think, my gosh, this woman's like a fossil. And we were mean kids. There was a reason we had to go to a Catholic school. Maybe not all of us, but some of us, a couple of us were very mean kids. And because we're going to Catholic school, we hear all these stories about this, that, and the other thing, the talking snake, and the book of Revelation. And the streets are paved with gold in this city, and there's pearly gates and stuff like that. And here's this woman who's really old, and we think she's going to pass away soon. Let's have fun with her. Let's ask her questions about heaven, because like I said, we were mean. And she surprised me, and I'll always remember what Sister Cecilia said when we asked her about heaven. And she said, and she ignored all that stuff about the pearly gates and the streets of gold and blah, blah, blah. But she said, heaven is when you realize the presence of God. And I remember her saying that. And even then, as an ignorant and outspokenly foolish child, I realized she had said something profound and it kind of ruined the whole game. And I remember it all these years. Heaven is a realization of the presence of God. It's not about the gates, the pearls, the gold, or any of that stuff. And one of the problems that people have is people often wait. They want to defer that. And there's no need to do that. You don't need to wait until you die. When you pray, you're in the presence of God. You're talking to God. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things we can do to improve our sense of the presence of God. And it is things like prayer, acting as if, this is what we're doing, that we're in the presence of God. So, and Baha'u'llah talks about the presence of God in the hidden words. I don't know if anyone wants to read that. Hopefully some of you are probably reading it. I'm going to read it out loud. And I can drink a little sip of water before I read it and then not worry about people looking at me while I'm drinking. Okay. God knows I had a sip. Oh, my friends, have ye forgotten the true and radiant morn, when in those hallowed and blessed surroundings you were all gathered in my presence beneath the shade of the tree of life, which is planted in the glorious paradise? Awestruck ye listened as I gave utterance to these three most holy words. O friends, prefer not your will to mine. Never desire that which I have not desired for you. And approach me not with lifeless hearts defiled with worldly desires and cravings. Would ye but sanctify your souls, ye would at this present hour recall that place and those surroundings, and the truth of my utterance should be made evident unto all of you. Mm. So this is a promise for Baha'is. So some of these things that Baha'is can do. Praying. I mentioned praying is a conversation with God. So there's a passage in the Kitab-i-Aqdas. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it tells Baha'is to pray on a daily basis. So there are obligatory prayers, there are non-obligatory prayers, but we're told to pray on a daily basis. And I think that has been very good for me. And it was a contrast with my Christian life, where I wasn't told to pray on a daily basis, and I think I just kind of did when convenient. We're told to study the writings. So I can pick a couple of passages from the Kitab-i-Aqdas, but we're supposed to study the writings. We're supposed to read the authenticated text of the central figures and study them. And that is a way to internalize what we are supposed to know. The manifestations of God provided the thoughts that God wanted us to have. And it only makes sense for us to take advantage of those. And one of the directions of Baha'u'llah is to study and to recite the holy word on a daily basis. So that's part of what we should do. Okay, and then there's some basic righteousness. There's living the life, living like mom is watching, so to speak, because mom is watching. So I'm going to read this passage too from the Kitab-i-Aqdas, paragraph 4. Say, from my laws, the sweet-smelling savor of my garment can be smelled, and by their aid, the standards of victory will be planted upon the highest peaks. The tongue of my power hath from the heaven of my omnipotent glory addressed to my creation these words. Observe my commandments for the love of my beauty. Happy is the lover that hath inhaled the divine fragrance of his best beloved from these words, laden with the perfume of a grace which no tongue can describe. By my life, he who hath drunk the choice wine of fairness from the hands of my bountiful favor will circle around my commandments that shine above the dayspring of my creation. So I think that's it. I'm going to go check. I don't think I have any more slides. Yep, I think I'm about set. So that's the presentation. Hopefully people have found something of value in that, and I'm happy to answer some questions. It looks like we're ahead of schedule.
Oh, beautiful, Pat. Thank you so much for your joyful presentation and really uplifting and so on purpose and so quick. All right, friends, we have time for connection and inspiration and questions. So in the chat box, related to what Pat shared this evening, or you'll have to answer to Dr. B. And of course, you can also give, all of your gratitude to Pat in the chat box as well. They're like singing the Jeopardy song to give you all some think time.
Some people they are in the car, they're driving. And
actually, I'll ask a question, Pat, while Pete's giving
okay.
you a chance. So, as a relatively new Baha'i, I say that a lot, but still only 9 years old. The Kitab-i-Aqdas, do you have any words of wisdom and guidance as to how to distill the essence down and put into action, Cliff Notes version wise?
This is a great question for somebody who has a youthful Baha'i. So back in the 80s, we had something called the synopsis and codification of the Kitab-i-Aqdas. And that just listed the stuff out that said, trim your fingernails, take a bath. It cut right to the chase. And as a list of things, it was, if you are familiar with the Kitab-i-Aqdas, it's a quick reminder of things you're supposed to do. Things that otherwise you might have forgotten, like get a haircut, stuff like that. And nowadays we've got this beautiful book, and sometimes we don't have the quick list. So there's a passage in the Kitab-i-Aqdas. I think and Nasser will probably clarify me. I think the English goes something in the vein of, do you think that we have revealed a mere book of laws? No, this is the finest wine. And so there's the quick version, the quick list of things, and then there's the full thing. So there's an advantage. If you need the quick one, I'd look at the synopsis and codification. But then if you're retired or you've got a part-time job, you want to study the whole thing. It's just a lot better.
I appreciate your thoughtful response, and I didn't really mean quick. It's more like, how am I supposed to remember all of this?
Okay, you're not. That's why you're supposed to study it.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Shoku says, how can we prove God's existence to atheists?
This is a great question, and I think it's I don't have a magic bullet answer to that. That is one thing I will point out. But I found that in having conversations with different people of different religious beliefs, I am far more frustrated by the people who believe that they know God like the back of their hand. These people are idolaters. I'm sorry, but I feel like I have much more honest conversations with atheists and agnostics than the people who have crazy ideas that they know God so well. So I think one of the keys are looking at the manifestation. So the manifestation is the proof of God. And so if I have a conversation with an atheist that lasts more than 5 or 10 minutes, I try to point out that my concept of God is not a defined concept. I tend to understand God as a very large, a very large being, and that the manifestation of God is the proof of God. If you're looking to see God, you're not doing it right. You want to look for like a reflection of God or a shadow of God, and that is something that implies God. So I draw their attention to the manifestation of God, and I suggest, is this someone you could take at their word? And if you could take them at their word, maybe we're heading in the right direction. And hopefully I'm answering the question. My favorite, I think Fuad was on, I don't know if he's still on, but probably, yeah, there we go, FA. My favorite manifestation of God for the purposes of conversation with an atheist or agnostic, of course, is the Buddha. So you've got these 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and I have a suggestion. Try Buddhism. Just try that out. You're not required to believe in anything bigger or greater than yourself, but it is a step in the direction of metaphysics. It's a step in the direction of spirituality. It's a step in the direction that life is more than what we can touch and smell and hear, but bigger than our senses. So that's one suggestion for a long conversation with an atheist to get off the bottom dead center. Another thing I point out, and I think we've talked about this at this fireside, is to talk as far as getting beyond the physical reality, is to talk about some emotions, to talk about love. That this is not something that's quantified. Often the atheists demand something they can measure, they can put their arms around, which always will be something that is defined, something that is constrained, something that is limited, something that necessarily could not be God. If I can put my arms around, obviously that's not God. And to get the conversation going, we want to point to things that are not physical, but everyone knows things are quite real. Things like greed, things like love. So hopefully that helps. Okay, Gary's got a question. Gary, I've always enjoyed conversations as well as, and it's to everyone, so I can read it out loud, okay? I enjoyed conversations with you as well as listening to you. This was an inspiration. Thank you very much, Gary. I've always enjoyed talking with you too. I remember the first time I met you, I think it was at the convention. We were talking about Baha'i TV, and I got here and you're gone. And it's like, oh my gosh. Oh, well, maybe I'll go to Arizona after I go to Florida. We'll get caught up eventually. Thanks, Gary.
All right, it's a quiet group. I think you've answered all of the world's questions.
I gotta mute myself here. Yeah.
Anybody else? And if not, maybe it's just an early
Can
evening where people.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
As long as you keep your eyes on the road.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we
Oh,
can.
you're driving. You got to be careful, buddy.
I know. It's okay. I'm just, I don't think you can ever convince an atheist that there is a God. I think that's actually a lost argument. I think you'll end up spending a lot of time. It's really the way you act yourself that other people then want to imitate you. And that's how you end up gaining people. It's not really by convincing them by argument, because my father was an atheist, and you could never argue with him. He loved the Jehovah's Witnesses that would come around. He would bring them in and he would serve them dinner and all sorts of things. And after 6 hours with him, I think they would turn to be atheists. So it was you know, so you can't ever think of it as, you know, I'm going to tell you something so profound that you're going to, you know, get on your knees and start to pray every day. It's really, it's okay, but it's just a lost argument. It's not really what you're wasting your time. It'd be better to demonstrate why you feel like you are enlightened in that way. And I think the Buddhist concept is ideal. We all should be striving to become enlightened. It's completely peppered in all the books. My favorite thing in the Kitabi Akdas, by the way, is that one of the rules and 2 wives. So I remind the rules, by the way.
Okay, you were coming in and out. So your favorite part of the Kitabi Akdas is which one?
There is a quote there that says, he says, try not to take any more than 2 wives.
I'm sorry I asked that again.
Most people don't know that. I bring that up because let's be open about everything that's there, good, bad, sort of some different. It's just important, I think, that that everything is brought out, not hidden.
Interesting. Thank you for shining a light on that. I'll go searching for it now.
What's in there?
I'm sure.
It's in there.
Okay, so now Sakta actually, oh, sorry, did you want to say more, Pat?
Yes, Dara, this is a very interesting. I want to share with you a story of Hand of the Cause. Mr. Frutan said when he was in Moscow, and he was a graduate student at the University of Moscow, and his roommate was a Bolshevik, new, very excited young man. And he would ask Mr. Frutan his name. He would say he was Ali Akbar. He was called himself Albert. He said, Albert, do you believe in God? And Mr. Frutan thought about it. He said, what do I tell this young man? That because this was the beginning of no God and the religion is opium of masses, etc., etc., etc. He said, Albert, I don't believe in the God that you believe. And the problem is this: our conception about God is something, a product of our imagination and our knowledge and time, etc., etc. For me, when I was a child, my dad or somebody strong was God, really, can do this, can do that, can do that. You know, as time changed on and my understanding changed, God changes and things like that. This is a story of mankind. And when you look at the history, we worship sun, we worship moon, we worship this, we worship wind, we worship fire, etc., etc., etc. These are all the things that we appreciated. But Rumi has a very interesting poem, you know, that he said, if you really want to see the sun, open your eyes. You see the sun. The sun, S-U-N, he said, is a proof of its own existence. But if you really want to see, just look at it. And that is what really Pat is helping us and telling us. If we become conscious of this fact that God is always with us, and as Abdul Baha said, invoke the power of Holy Spirit, He's always with you. So this is, if we do that, we feel that, you know, this is something that you really have to experience. He said in many of the writings of Baha'u'llah, he said, oh, my friend, oh, the beloved one, all things like that. Now the relationship is that we have to really work at it. And he said, study is out of our things at this time, unfortunately. We are just used to this flipping our Facebook or whatever we have, and this is our knowledge, you know. This is our news, this is our thing, unfortunately. But Baha'u'llah has told us that you should pray in the morning and in the evening, and he said, study, and the power is given to you. And so, and Albert constantly tells us that we don't have clergy. You are the clergy now. you have to really do the job, and then you really experience these things that he said, I have unsealed the choice wine for you. This is what Pat was teaching us. He said, these laws and ordinances, these are not laws and ordinances. He said, I have unsealed the choice wine for you. Taste it and enjoy it. Taste it and enjoy it, really. I am so, your presentation, Pat, really very profound, very, very profound. And I really appreciate that. It really food for our thoughts for long, long time.
And Dr. B, in that, so thank you for your enthusiasm sharing that as well, Dr. B. A comment and a question. So Satya, hi, wherever you are, in New York or somewhere. She says, great presentation, Pat. Many times we remember God when we are going through tough times, but we must remember God through all times. We ask him to help and protect us when we are going through a bad time, but we also need his help and protection. Absolutely. And then Hajar, okay, here you go. The question of the day. Is there any scientific proof of existing God?
I answered that to her privately.
Okay, well.
Share that with everyone.
Yes, Zibo says so.
Oh, there you go. There you go. That's scientific. Yep.
Pat, would you like to add to that?
I think that hits the nail right there on the head. Ziva said so. I don't know when the question was posted, but I think earlier I said that anything I can put my arms around, anything I can define is something that is not God. Anything that's subject to time, subject to my senses, subject to the finite world, that's not God. So the things that we do in science are things like physics, and then the things that that are metaphysics are things that are not in that kind of science, and God is in the metaphysical. The metaphysical precedes the physical. So and people have talked about measuring bodies before they died and measuring them after they died, and they're a little bit lighter, and that's the weight of a soul. And I don't believe those things. I think that your body is constantly burning oxygen, and so as you breathe your last breath, carbon is leaving your body, and of course it should be a little bit lighter than it was before your previous breath. And so to me, those kinds of things don't prove souls. They don't prove God. For me, I think it goes back to what Fuad said. You are the proof of God. Just as the manifestation of God is the proof of God to you. You as a faithful person become a proof of the manifestation. So since we have a little bit of time and Dara's letting me talk a bit, let me tell a quick story. So we're going to go on for 3 minutes. So back when I was in college and I became a born again Christian, there was a guy I knew, Rich Rubietta. He was a really nice guy. He was a born again Christian. He introduced me to another guy who was like a campus missionary, a guy named Howie. I forgot Howie's last name. And Howie just seemed so sincere as a Christian, as a disciple of Christ. I don't think there was any stupid trick I could try on him to startle him, like, could God make a rock so big he couldn't lift it? So Howie would have a little short conversation about, what do I believe? Why do I believe what I believe? So classic example, I believe that the people landed on the moon in 1969. Some people might not, but I believe that. And I believe that because I got that from reliable sources. And so Howie pointed to the Gospels to say, well, these are old. They might not be the most reliable sources, but most of the people who wrote these stories ended up being persecuted for their religious beliefs. Many of them were martyred for their religious beliefs, and yet they persisted in telling these stories. Certainly the letters of the Apostle Paul, who was a contemporary of some of the actual disciples of Christ. So I needed to give these stories credence. And even though they don't always line up about how many loaves and how many fishes, the big pieces of the story lined up. And so when we go through our lives, if we go through our lives with this calm, with a sense of humor, with the attributes that we see in Abdul Baha. When we let ourselves be inspired and strengthened and emboldened by Baha'u'llah and steadied by Baha'u'llah, where we don't get upset that somebody insulted us or this, that, or the other thing. And I do get upset, but I try to stay mellow. But when we become that exemplar, then it is easier for us to share our faith in a convincing manner, just as Fuad pointed out to us 20 minutes ago. And that's how it worked with Howie. I know when I met Baha'is, I was always impressed at my brother's wedding, at Firesides. I was always impressed how Baha'is were working together, were integrating people. They were living these Baha'i teachings about a global society. They were embodying it. And that's what we can do by living out the teachings. We embody the faith.
Beautiful.
I think, let me just continue with that. I don't think you can prove that. That was the question. Can you prove that there's God? And those experiments by the soul, by the way, never panned out. They actually didn't show that there was any less weight. You know, it's simple in this. Science is a way of discovering nature and figuring out the codes of everything. Hence, we can make mustard gas, and I give it to patients, chemotherapy, to get them better. But you can take the same mustard gas and give it to someone to kill them. And that science can't answer that. It can't answer how you should use mustard gas or chemotherapy. That's where the spiritual nature of us comes in. We have to actually decide how to do that. And the guidance that you get from Baha'i teachings essentially helps you do that. That's simple. But science is pretty accurate, and science can discover things that will help us and does help us. But it can't answer, not only can it not answer all the questions, it really can't answer a lot of the important ones. And that's, I think, where the spirituality comes in. Science just can't answer that. It just can't tell you how you should use something, but it tells you what it does.
Thank you, Fuad.
Can I also jump in for a second?
Jump away.
All right. Now, one of the things that has helped me in my belief in God is when I can't believe in God the way God is described by many organized religions as a person that is in every day in your life. But when I look at the proof of God, I agree science cannot prove the existence of God. But I look at the intricacy, of the universe and how well it is connected, how well it is interconnected. If you just look at an animal, let's say you're looking at a gazelle on the African plains, a lion kills that gazelle for food, eats part of it. Hyenas come off. They also eat off of that. Then you have birds and insects that come in and pick the bones clean so that there will be no disease from those bones going into the air. The universe is so interconnected, it has to take a mind which is unconceivable to us, a power that is unconceivable to us, to create it and to set it into motion. So I look at God not taking part in my everyday life. I look at him setting up a situation. And one of the things that has always struck me about how God does help us is before I became Baha'i, I was a member of the Church of Science of Mind. It's a very interesting philosophy. And one of the ways they described your relationship to God, which has always stuck with me, was imagine that you were in the ocean. The ocean was God. Imagine that your body was filled with holes so that that water, that ocean, could flow through you. That is God constantly flowing through you. And as God flows through you, you get all of the blessings and answers. You just have to open up your heart and open up your mind to see those blessings, to see those answers, and to act on them. But it's always there, and that's how God really helps us in our everyday life. And it's, as I said, an image that has stuck with me and has helped me to really believe in God without scientific proof, because otherwise normally I'm a science kind of guy, but I can believe that.
As Pat said already, you know, in that synopsis of the book of Agdas, there are some miscellaneous things, and there are things that you should do. You know, there are things that they are good things for you. For example, you don't backbite, etc., etc. As we follow these things, you become a mirror of God yourself, really. And this is what really is all about. You don't even need to go to universe. Look at yourself. There is a tradition in Islam. It says the person that recognizes himself, he recognizes God. You know, and the Arabic word for this is such a beautiful thing. And also there are many, many people, they have written commentary on this just concept, you know, if you want to know God, get to know yourself. And this is in every religion, really.
Such passionate discussion. Anybody else? Maybe somebody's voice who we normally don't hear from before Rebecca. She looked like she was ready to jump in for closing prayer. She's ready. Any other voices out there?
Thank you, Pat.
Well, okay, so but
say a healing prayer for the president.
As a matter of fact, I have a healing prayer.
Okay, good.
It's very thoughtful of you.
Are we ready?
Dara, are we ready for it?
I think
Go for it.
it's a quiet evening, absolutely.
Okay, sure.
I'm sorry, and all the other
Rebecca, go ahead. Ziba, Rebecca is going to say a prayer. Go ahead.
O God, my God, I beg of thee by the ocean of thy healing, and by the splendors of the day star of thy grace, and by thy name through which thou didst subdue thy servants, and by the pervasive power of thy most exalted word, and the potency of thy most august pen, and by thy mercy that had preceded the creation of all who are in heaven and on earth, to purge me with the waters of thy bounty from every affliction and disorder, and from all weakness and feebleness. Thou seest, O my Lord, thy suppliant, waiting at the door of thy bounty, and him who had set his hopes on thee, clinging on the cord of thy generosity. Deny him not, I beseech thee, the things he seeketh from the ocean of thy grace and the day star of thy loving kindness. Powerful art thou to do what pleaseth thee. There is none other God save thee, the ever forgiving, the most generous.